Welcome to another episode of Jackman Radio. I am your host, Mike Jackman, and tonight we are joined by esteemed investigative journalist and reporter, Mr. Tom O'Neill. Tom is
How
the
you
author.
doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on.
Oh, nice to be on. It's been a while. I guess in the works for a while. So
Yeah, we were kind of saying before we got on air, we've been in touch since 2019, and I'm sure you've gotten snowballed with requests, especially since your Joe Rogan appearance and some of the other big shows you've been on. But
yeah, more since him.
yeah. So before we get into it, I just want to do a quick blurb here about Tom and the book, which is available on Amazon.com. Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. A journalist's 20-year fascination with the Manson murders leads to shocking new revelations about the FBI's involvement in this riveting reassessment of an infamous case in American history. Over 2 grim nights in Los Angeles, the young followers of Charles Manson murdered 7 people, including the actress Sharon Tate, then 8 months pregnant. With no mercy and seemingly no motive, the Manson family followed their leader's every order. Their crimes lit a flame of paranoia across the nation, spelling the end of the 60s. Manson became one of history's most infamous criminals, his name forever attached to an era when charlatans mixed with prodigies, free love was as possible as brainwashing, and utopia or dystopia was just an acid trip away. So, kind of getting into it, you spent 20 years working on what was originally a magazine piece that was for the 30th anniversary, and you've gone on this odyssey now it's 25 years, and you've created this book. How is, obviously a lot of our viewers have seen some of your interviews, especially the Rogan one, and you did one with Rick Rubin, which I thought was phenomenal. But
Thank you.
what has that been like for you, the response, and like when did you realize you really hit something with the book and the release?
You know what? I just realized this minute. I had no idea. But today's the 5-year anniversary because it came out on June 19th, 2019. So I told you I was getting texts from the publisher, and I thought they were just saying happy 5th year anniversary. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride, and it goes up and down. There'll be interest in it, and then it'll kind of wane, and then people tweet about it with big followings, and then it goes kind of crazy again. So, but they seem to be steadily reading it, which is nice. It was kind of, I think, fading. Excuse me, I think it was fading away about 5-6 months after it came out because, for whatever reasons, a lot of people didn't know about it. And then the Rogan thing happened, and it's always he changed the course of the book's history because of his massive following and his enthusiasm and almost. I mean, he talks about it a few times a month with other guests, and every time that happens, we get a spike. So it's great. I'm real happy that it's reached a much wider audience than I ever thought it would. And it's we were always worried it was too much of a conspiracy book for a mainstream audience. And I don't know if people are more open-minded, or I do know that, one of the kind of mixed blessings of the book is some people like this part and some people don't, but I don't really reach any definitive conclusions despite all the time I spent on it, saying it absolutely happened one way or the other. And I didn't because I couldn't, I didn't find the smoking gun I was looking for. I just got a lot of smoking pistols or daggers. So I think the readers that like that also like the fact that they're allowed to make up their own mind and they're not told what to believe. So it's kind of worked in an unexpected way, and not complaining.
Definitely, and the whole true crime aspect of it too. I really feel like our culture is obsessed with true crime. There's not enough shows and material to satisfy the appetite for it. So
yeah, we're riding that wave too, I guess.
Yeah, and especially with the Manson case. I mean, you have all these made for there's like a made for network Netflix series, and then there's with obviously fictional takes on it. But Just overall, it really feels like with any big event like this, like the Lennon assassination or RFK, we can touch on those a little bit later. There is a narrative that kind of forms. And some people call it the official story, and some people say, kind of like what you were alluding to earlier, well, we don't actually really know, so there may never be an answer to that. But I really feel like with your work, you did dig up some stuff that really kicked over new stones and made us kind of look at the whole thing from a different angle. When you were doing your investigating, what was like an aha moment maybe that you haven't talked about as much?
There were a few, but unfortunately they didn't come that frequently, but they came just enough to keep me going. The biggest one was when I found these letters between Jolly West, who was a psychiatrist researcher in the 50s and 60s, primarily doing this brainwashing secret research for the CIA. And he had denied his entire career when he was accused of it, when the program called MK Ultra was exposed in the mid-70s. He was on the front page of the New York Times, and he said, I had nothing to do with that. They approached me, and I wasn't interested. And they never investigated him, or, again, we don't know. They probably did investigate him, but they covered up the investigation. He never got publicly accused again or was ever held accountable, and he went to his grave really never being held accountable for these horrific, human subject experiments with drugs, hypnosis on people without consent, knowledge for at least 20 years. And I found these letters in his archive at UCLA that it was like finding a needle in a haystack. I didn't know that they were going to be in there, but I just had a hunch, like a gut feeling that this guy was involved in this. Nobody had ever gone through the archive before. He died about 2 years before I got the assignment to do a magazine article that evolved into a book. And when I found out he had died recently, I approached UCLA and they said, I think they had 160 boxes. That grew to 200 and some that are there now. But we have not processed them because nobody's asked to see them. So they said it usually takes a couple years. Excuse me, just getting over a cold. They said it usually takes a couple years for us. They have to look at every single page. They have to organize it, divide it into appropriate folders, boxes, whatever. And that takes a long time. But since I was a journalist on a deadline that I blew 1,000 times, they did agree to expedite it and started releasing me a couple boxes a week that went through the summer. It was like 3 or 4 months, and it was in the middle of that time period that I found what I was looking for, a bunch of papers from 1953 through 56 or 7 that weren't supposed to be in there, that he had probably inadvertently left with his hundreds of thousands of other documents. The guy had a long career, and he might have missed them because the CIA person he was communicating with, Sidney Gottlieb, was using an alias and a fake address that he might have forgotten about and not looked at the content. Or again, he probably didn't do it himself when he decided what to keep and what not to. And for whatever reason, and to my luck, they were accidentally left behind. And that was the first really big aha moment.
Yeah, and in looking at Jolly West, did you come across anything about Milton V. Klein?
Yeah, I think I interviewed him. He was was he in Massachusetts or New England or somewhere?
He may have been New York or Massachusetts. The reason I asked,
he was quoted in John Mark's book, I think, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, about because most of the people in the CIA said it was impossible to create a programmed assassin, and he was one of the ones who said, no, actually it is, and they did, and I was part of that, but he would never really say what he had done personally.
Yeah, because he turns up in Mark David Chapman's prison cell after John Lennon's shot, which is like that's insane, and that's like a parallel to your part about Jack Ruby and Jolly West turning up in his prison cell before that trial. So because Chapman the whole thing about the Lennon assassination is that, I did it because of Catcher in the Rye. I'm going to plead guilty. I wanted to be famous. Lennon was a phony. All this stuff. He wasn't saying any of that stuff until after Klein visited him in prison. And
I didn't realize that. Somebody sent me a book recently, an author who wrote a book about the Chapman case, where I think the thesis is what you're saying. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. I guess I have to take a look at it.
Yeah, that's David Whelan's book, Mind Games. It's a phenomenal book. We've had him on the program, and so it's just interesting the overlap between your work and some of the other work that's out there, and what kind of seems to be end up being corroborated, and some of the names that crop up. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, last year there was kind of some news about the Manson case in 2023 because Linda Kasabian passed away. Did you ever have a chance to talk to her or interview her?
I tried. No, I called, I wrote, from here in Los Angeles where I'm based. She was up in Washington State, and I got either no's or no thank yous. I never personally, that I know of, spoke to her, but I went up to Tacoma. I'll say it now because she's dead, but I found out I could not find her address. I mean, she was completely off the grid, but I found the address of her daughter, and I knew that her daughter spent quite a bit of time with her. Well, one of them or a few of them were on Facebook, and I know that Linda would babysit the daughter's kids. So I kind of knocked on the door quite a bit, and the daughter was an ex-criminal herself who had been in prison. The kids were pretty rough. Not all of them that she had, but a couple of them. I could probably get sued for libel, but if I say more than one, let's just say one, had gone to prison for, I think it was munitions trafficking, drug selling, and Linda was involved with that. And that was a daughter whose house I went to, and she was kind of scary and made it very clear that her mother wouldn't talk to me and wanted nothing to do with me, and that I shouldn't be on the property. So I never got to her. I spent a week in rainy, gray, cold, depressing Tacoma.
Oh, that's hairy. You know what I found out? Linda Kasabian was actually raised in Milford, New Hampshire. Which is 20 minutes. 20 minutes from where I am right now, Tom. Which is 20 minutes up the road is Milford, where she was raised.
Yeah, I've got all of the. Kind of public document that came from her time as being raised in that town, and she'd been arrested a few times in New Hampshire, but just for, I think, driving infractions. She was arrested in Boston on drug charges before she even got to Los Angeles. I mean, she was a tough girl when she was about 16. She was with a biker group, but her family, Druin, I think was the mother's maiden name, or her maiden name, I think, was Druin, Drouin. I hope people don't bother them, but there might be some left in that area.
I do know that last name. I know some Druins. I'm probably not related, but you never know. New Hampshire.
You can do some muckraking, Mike.
We'll do some sleuthing, but
I hope you haven't lost some friends.
According to the official story, Kasabian was like in the car, and she stayed outside. Right, she was kind of out in the yard when it was happening, and when some of the victims were running out. Like, do you really believe that, or do you think she went in the house?
Not for a second. I mean, I know that she changed her story. And I know that Bugliosi, the prosecutor who also wrote Helter Skelter, had a very, let's say, intimate relationship with her when she was in jail and was supposed to be...
Really?
I'm only saying they were together without a lawyer present quite a bit. And at the very least, one of the most important things for him to do to get her to testify to at trial, and he writes about this in his book, was to say that none of them were on drugs that night, the 2 nights of the murder, and she accompanied the group both nights, because after they were convicted, which they were, if he wanted to get the death penalty for them, which he did, he had to prove that they weren't impaired by drugs or alcohol. So she testified on the stand that, to the best of her knowledge, nobody else took drugs. She didn't take drugs. She would have known if they had been taken. But then, in the early 2000s, she probably got paid a lot to do a TV show interview with a British company that reenacted the case, and she narrated a large part of it. and she talked about taking all this speed or LSD. Now I forget. Right
Yeah.
before going up to the Tate House, and she then was on Larry King with Vince Bugliosi to promote the show, and she looked like a ventriloquist dummy. Every time she started, Vince is sitting next to her, and Larry. It's a fascinating interview. It's online, although I haven't looked at it for a long time. Every time King asked her a question, Vince would answer for her. And at one point, Larry King, who was old friends with Vince, he used to go on all the time, and they used to hang out at the Playboy Mansion here together, and I think play tennis. He said, "Vince, God damn it, would you let her answer the question herself?" He was so scared she was going to repeat the lies she had done on that show. She also, on that show, said that she went into the car of the teenager, Steve Perrin, who was killed first, shot to death, and she said she took his wallet from his body. Now, she testified, I think, I can't remember how many days in the Tate trial, and then she had to testify again. Leslie Van Houten was later retried in 1976 or 77. She had to testify again at her trial, and she testified at Tex Watson's trial, which was separate, about minute by minute every single thing that happened that night at the Tate House. She never testified about being anywhere near the killings or witnessing Steve Perrin get killed. So now she's saying, I went in there and I took the wallet from his jacket, from inside his jacket. I mean, that was stunning to me. And at that point, I had already been rebuffed by her when I spent the week in Tacoma. So I circled back again and, tried all over again to get an interview with her. I even went to the producers. I should try this again now because I think it was about 2012 or something that this happened, or 8. I can't remember. Anyway, and I approached the producers and asked for the transcript, the unedited transcript of their interviews with her. And at first they were going to release them to me. I was another journalist, and then something happened, and all of a sudden they said, we absolutely can't share any of that with you. And that was more than 10 years ago. I wonder if I went back to whomever has them now. Or if anybody listening wants to do it for me, let me know.
Yeah, it could be somebody new. And you mentioned Leslie Van Houten. She was actually paroled last year. Did you ever I mean, I'm sure you tried to talk to everybody, but did you ever actually talk to her? Or
I tried to talk to her a long time ago. I tried to talk to all the women. Didn't talk to any of the ones who were incarcerated. I talked to some on the outside. Leslie's lawyers at the time wouldn't let me talk to her. And then a few years before she was released, her lawyer was going to allow me to talk to her. And then I should have pushed a little for it, and it didn't happen. And the window was open when she was still in prison. Since she's been out, I'm not sure what her plan is, but I know she hasn't done a single interview yet, to my knowledge, that she's keeping a very low profile and has to be really careful not to make it look like she's going out there and enjoying the fame of, being a notorious ex-murderer or paroled murderer. So, no, I made that mistake. There's a couple times I kind of dropped the ball. I'm not sure she would have told me anything differently than she's already said at all her parole hearings, and she has done a lot of interviews in the past. But yeah, that's something I regret now.
And then Clem Grogan was the only other person paroled for this whole deal. Him and Tex Watson are still alive. I feel like Tex Watson knows a lot more per your work. But any luck with those two?
No, I mean, I communicated with Watson in the early 2000s through his then wife, who he's since been divorced from. And they said the only way he would talk to me was if I limited my questions to Christianity and his conversion, or his redemption and being saved by Jesus. And I said, I can't do that. I mean, I'm happy to hear him talk about it, but I have to ask about the case. And maybe I had too much integrity then, because I could have agreed to it and then gone in and started throwing him questions about the case. But I didn't want to do it, and I thought they would respect that and eventually let me talk to him, but it never happened. And Grogan, I thought I wrote about it in the book. I can't even remember. I found him under his new name after he'd been released, let's just say in the Pacific Northwest, knocked on the door, he denied being him. And then I started taking out documents on his doorstep until he finally admitted he was him, but wouldn't talk to me. And I told him, well, I've got a lot of information about you that I'm going to put in this book I'm working on, and you really need to know about it before. You need to comment on it. And he goes, I absolutely won't. He goes, I want to live a private life. That person doesn't exist anymore. And he literally didn't. He had a whole new name, a whole new identity.
Wow.
But I said, I'm going to come back in 24 hours and see if you changed your mind. So I came back in 24 hours. And actually, before I got back there, I had left him my card. I got a cease and desist letter from his lawyer who said I'd be arrested if I knocked at his door. So I knocked at the door anyway. I wasn't arrested. He opened the door and for like a minute said, did you get the letter? Because I'm going to call the police. And I said, I did get the letter, but I wanted to hear it from you, not your lawyer. And he said, I don't want to have anything to do with you. So I did leave.
Wow. Dogged. Mr. O'Neill, folks, the dogged, intrepid reporter. And I feel like another reason why your stuff is resonating is because we don't see so much of this anymore. And
unfortunately, people don't. I mean, it's kind of surprising to me that people seem so surprised at what I thought was routine legwork. But I guess now I know that it doesn't happen that much anymore.
Well, was there ever a point of time, Tom, in your research and doing this kind of stuff where you were legitimately frightened?
Well, not in the ways people expect. I wasn't frightened of Manson family members. I mean, I had other hairy encounters when I was trying to show up. I mean, I literally showed up at probably 6 to 8 or 10 former Manson family homes. People who had gone off the grid, changed their names, disassociated from him, but we're still pretty tough people. And 2 or 3 of those places, I got similar receptions that I did from Grogan. And 2 of them, I think they're in the book, involved Manson women or their kids chasing me off the property with gardening tools. And that was a little scary in the moment, but, not too scary. And then I wasn't really getting any serious threats during all this. I got a bunch of threats from one of the drug dealers who was selling drugs to the victims at the house. And for the first month or 2, he and his drug circle, were the first suspects. And I'm not convinced that they were completely clean. I mean, I know they weren't clean, but that they weren't completely free of being affiliated with the Manson family and maybe being involved in the drug transactions that Manson was doing. So one of the guys was threatening me a lot. I got a little nervous, but not too frightened. The person I was the most scared of all was the prosecutor, the retired prosecutor who had become the author, who wrote Helter Skelter, Vince Bugliosi. He was more dangerous than probably anybody that wasn't in prison, and he belonged in prison. And he was threatening and real scary because he didn't want my book to come out.
Yeah, and you guys started out cordially.
Yeah, I did. And, then I started digging. And if I had just done what was originally planned to be a magazine piece, he probably would have ended cordially, and he would have had an easier end of his life because he spent a lot of time and effort trying to stop my book, writing letters, harassing me, calling me, telling other people I was interviewing not to talk to me. But he in the beginning, I was just asking him the superficial questions. But in the very first interview, I don't want to spoil the book if people get it. In the very first interview, he agreed to go off the record when I asked him to tell me one thing that he had never shared before about the case. And this was going to be for a story at the 30th anniversary, which was 99. That was going to be for a magazine. And that never happened because I decided it had to be a book. And then he kind of opened the whole floodgates. If he hadn't said, let's go off the record here, I might not have ended up doing a book. I might have turned in a story a month later and then never thought about it again. And it would have been a standard story. But for whatever reason, he agreed when I asked him to tell me some information that kind of upended a portion of the official narrative of the first night of murders. And I had to follow up on that. And that's what kind of was the little snowball that became a massive bolder, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. If he had never done that, I probably at that point would have just done a conventional 30th historical anniversary piece that would have been boring, but I still would have gotten my little paycheck.
It wouldn't have put you down the path.
Yeah, and
Pivotal.
I might have been happier too if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, you would.
I always wonder, had I been back to the beginning, if somebody gave me the choice to, have had this finished in 3 months or spend the 20 years weren't fun.
You wouldn't be the Charles Manson uncle at Thanksgiving every year.
Yeah, well, no, are you kidding me? Nobody will allow me to talk about it at the table. They're so tired of it. That ended well before the book came out.
Yeah. Well, are you familiar with Dave McGowan's work? Scenes from the Canyon?
Yeah. I'm asked about that in every interview. The guy was a pioneer. He broke some ground, but when I got the book, I just was surprised because I got it at least, I remember when it came out, maybe 2000, early 2000s. I just was surprised at how he hadn't documented a lot of what he was claiming. There was so much speculation, and I wanted to meet him and talk to him because he did have important reporting.
Yeah.
But he had died at that point. I mean, I think he had just died. So, but everybody who was at all familiar with an alternative story to the official,
right,
always asked me about that. And I don't want to bash the guy because he worked hard too. And but I don't even. It was so long ago. I'm looking around now. I can't remember if I even still have the book or where I put it. But I don't trust books that don't have notes, end notes, or footnotes, and
heavily sourced.
That aren't heavily sourced. And his book was disappointing that way.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of related to his book. It just seems like a lot of celebrities out there at that time have done even those that were, maybe peripherally connected to this, have done their best to not talk about it or to downplay their connections. Yeah. And I'm a huge Beach Boys fan, and obviously the Beach Boys angle is brought up a lot. I don't know if you saw the recent documentary, but they mentioned Manson a little bit, but I really feel like they're leaving a lot out. And Mike Love, the lead singer who's still around, was interviewed about this, and he just said, I met Charles Manson once, and he told that story. I don't know if you ever heard his story about meeting Manson.
I read he did a memoir maybe 5 or 10 years ago where he talks about, did he hire Susan Atkins or one of the girls to babysit or something? I haven't seen the documentary. I want to see it at some point. I heard it's pretty good, but that it ends abruptly.
Yeah.
But there's so much stuff to cover that they didn't get to. I don't know about him. I did try to interview him a long time ago, and he wouldn't talk to me. I don't think a lot of these people, especially if they're writing a book, they will kind of inflate what could have been a minor. I'm sure he saw Manson at least once or twice because Manson was a constant companion of his brother Dennis or his cousin Dennis for a while. Yeah. But I don't know that. I think, to sell books, he might have, let's say, embellished.
Did Terry Melcher ever publish his book, or did he? Because I know he kind of, that whole scene of you on the rooftop there during that his boozy afternoon. Did he ever end up publishing anything before he died?
My understanding was he didn't want to do that. He was just reaching for kind of a lifeboat to get me not to write what I was going to write, because he kind of presented it to me. He said, people have been asking me to write my memoir my whole career, and I've never wanted to do it. He goes, but if I did it with someone like you, it could be an amazing explosive book, because not only will I talk about my time producing the Beatles and the Beach Boys and what do you call it, the Paul Revere and the Raiders and Buffalo Springfield, all those bands, but nobody knows the stories that I know about my mother. And I go, people have no idea that she wasn't the girl next door. And I'm like, wow, you're really willing to throw your mother over the, to get me not to write this? So I don't know if he had ever really wanted to do something. He didn't die that much long after that interview. I think it was within 3 or 4 years. But that's a really good question. I mean, maybe he started it, or maybe he was working on it when he died, and that stuff is sitting in a box somewhere. I do know that when his mother wrote or allowed her authorized biography to be written, probably in the 80s, I think it was. It's a real thick book. Um, she had him write the chapter about Manson, and he just lied, in that entire chapter. So if he had done his book again, if he had done a full book, I wouldn't trust it.
Right, because he, and I think you mentioned this in the interview you did recently with Rick Rubin. There's basically a high likelihood that he went out to Spawn Ranch and even further to another ranch.
Barker Ranch out in the desert.
After the murders, and was kind of dragged around or pleading, hey, you don't. I'm sorry, so. The point is for me, clearly that click probably through secondhand information or friend of a friend, they all know a lot more. Because Melcher co-wrote Kokomo with Mike Love and with John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, and of course, I'm sure you've heard the allegations about John Phillips from his daughter.
I actually interviewed. I didn't interview. I talked to Mackenzie on the phone, and I talked to Genevieve Waite, who was dating. So John Phillips and Michelle had broken up, and I think they were either divorced or going through a divorce by the time the Manson murders happened. And she was already dating Dennis Hopper, I think, and Terry. Well, she was dating Terry Melcher right after the murders. But when the murders happened, she moved back in with John Phillips for a few months because she was terrified. But John Phillips would not talk to me. I took Michelle Phillips out for a lunch, which she did as a favor to a mutual friend of ours, and she regretted it. I don't know if I told Ruben that story, but at one point she excused herself from the table of the fancy restaurant we were at, went to the bathroom, and she came back and she said, "I'm just going to tell you this, I vomited." She goes, "This is so upsetting to talk about." She was sleeping with Roman Polanski while Sharon was pregnant and felt horrible about that. Frankly, I'm not so sure Sharon cared, because I know that at that point she wanted to divorce him as soon as she had the baby.
Yeah.
But Michelle Phillips felt guilty about it, and also the fact that I don't know, it felt like they were close friends, her and Sharon Tate, and I think she felt like it was a betrayal. And just the idea of what happened to somebody she knew and loved. It's hard for me to think about, what Sharon Tate went through that night she died. And I've never, I was 10 years old when that happened. And it's really the idea of getting stabbed to death when you're 8.5 months pregnant and begging for the life of your baby is just horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrendous beyond comprehension. And, that's the thing about this case, is that the very real human element that I think sometimes has gotten lost in all the helter-skelter stuff and the official story. And, it's really about relationships and connections. And I think what it really shows is the dark underbelly of that scene and of California and of Hollywood, the music industry. And it's just, I think that's why it endures to this day. It's just such a fascinating, story and all the things that overlap.
Yeah.
And,
I am still amazed that they keep cranking out new books and shows and stuff. And it's in my book, but when I was asked to do it by the magazine, I'm like, why? Who cares? Hasn't the story been done to death? And that was a long time ago. There's been a lot of movies and books since then.
So we kind of touched on MK Ultra earlier, and I'm sure a lot of our audience is familiar with that. And of course, officially they said, "Oh, it didn't work. We failed. We can't do it." Although some bragged that, yes, we did do it. We can destroy a mind and put something new in there. What do you think MK Ultra looks like now? What do you think it's morphed into? And if we know about how nefarious it was 50 years ago, what do you think is afoot now with it?
Well, I do get asked that question a lot, and I have the same answer every time. I have no idea whether it's ongoing, whether it stopped when they said it stopped in 72 or 73. If I had to bet, I'd say no way would it stop, because despite what they testified to at Congress, where they said that we made a mistake, we experimented on people we shouldn't have, We spent all this money on, research that was the most money the CIA had ever spent on a project in the history of the CIA until that point when it was divulged in the mid-70s. But nothing worked. It was a huge mistake, a blunder. I mean, they were lying through their teeth because I have the document showing it. So they're probably still lying. I mean, I don't know if people have asked them since then if it exists, or I'm sure that, I mean, I have no evidence. That's the point I'm trying to make, is my reporting kind of stops at about 75. I have no evidence that it's still going on, but my hunch would be that it is, but that's just complete speculation.
So I saw a tweet you did where you have a clip of Tucker Carlson talking about chaos, and he maybe doesn't specifically mention your book, but what's the acknowledgement in the credits for his father? What's the connection to his father, and what angle there did you kind of look at?
Because his father was fabulous. He was really helpful. So his father was named Richard Carlson, Dick Carlson. And I don't know a whole lot about Tucker Carlson, but I think he's a Swanson food heir. And I think it's his mother's side that had the money. The father was like a really aggressive, old school, the kind of reporter we were talking about earlier, who became pretty prominent in the 60s as a TV investigative reporter on the local TV shows. I don't think he ever became nationally known. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was just a local guy. But he and Bugliosi despised each other and butted heads. And he was really one of the only ones during the trial who smelled a rat. And, I got some of his old reporting and found out, because his name also came up in the death penalty phase. He was trying to show that Bugliosi had participated in this illegal attorney switch. And it's complicated to get into here now, but if people read the book, it's in there, where Susan Atkins was basically the prosecution planted one of their own attorneys into her defense to get her to do their bidding. And then as soon as they got what they needed from her, they dumped her. And Bugliosi orchestrated that whole thing. And Dick Carlson found that out and was trying to report it. And then the power of the DA's office shut him down. And it looked like it was about to come out with another reporter he was working with during the death penalty phase. But the DA's office, again, I think the judge, and I hate to sound conspiratorial, that I think, but I really think the judge was part of this huge conspiracy to withhold the true story of this. Anyway, when I found out about all this, I tracked Dick Carlson down. There's some other kind of old timers here who I've been interviewing and who are helping me, and found him somewhere back east. I don't know. I think Tucker Carlson lives in Maine and shoots whatever he's shooting now. I don't know if it's a Twitter show or something, but I think he does it in Maine, and he was even doing his Fox show there. But I approached his dad, and he was fantastic. I mean, it's every journalist's dream to have another journalist open their files to you. So he sent me this massive file on all of his notes and reporting, unpublished reporting on Bugliosi, and said, just copy everything and send it back to me. So I got it, and I was actually going to copy it and send it back. And at one point he said, you know what? I'm an old man. Nobody's interested in that. Just keep it. You can have the originals. So I think he's still alive. I reached out to him when the book came out because I wanted to send him one, and I only had, I don't know if I didn't have a current mailing address, but I never heard back from him. So yeah, on the tweet, because I'm not a big fan of Tucker Carlson, but when I saw what he did, I kind of poked a little bit of fun at him because he talked about my book for like 5 or 10 minutes without ever saying the name of the book.
Right.
But
yeah.
But luckily, the people who know my book went on to whatever site it was on after it aired, and he might have actually corrected or mentioned it later. I can't remember, but I said in my tweet, the name of the book is this and that if you want to do something again. And also, your father was a huge help. He's in my acknowledgments, and I think what I just told you is in the end notes. Although I can't remember. But yeah, no, he was a huge help, and I wanted Tucker Carlson to know that through his family, he had a part in the creation of the book. Because I got stuff from Tucker Carlson about Bugliosi that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Right.
Not Tucker Carlson, Richard
His
Carlson,
father,
the
yeah.
father.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta get you on with Tucker, man. Let's get like that Frost Nixon showdown, Tucker Tom style. You know, I mean,
Well, somebody got in touch with me after that, and they said they were a friend of his producer. This is when he was still at Fox, and I think the producer's name was Scooter. And he said Scooter's really interested in talking to you about going on the show. And I said, well, if Scooter's interested, you got to me, give him my information and tell him to reach out. I'll have a conversation with him. And I never heard from him. And it was shortly after that Tucker got fired. And I know people in the conspiracy world think one of the reasons he got fired was he was starting to tell the truth about the Kennedy assassination.
he went pretty hard on Mike Pompeo there for a couple of broadcasts, and
Yeah, did he do that on TV, or was that after when he had his Twitter show, or is it a Twitter show that he has now?
It's on X, and he has his own website.
Yeah. No, I saw that Mike Pompeo reporting, which is great. I'm glad he's able to, broadcast that information out there. It's important.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. You say you're not a fan of Tucker, and I totally know where you're coming from, because 21 years ago, he was one of the biggest cheerleaders for the Iraq War, and he was getting paid a lot of money to go on TV and promote that. And I remember watching Crossfire, him against Paul Begala and James Carville on CNN, and he had his bow tie, and I really didn't like him either. But I do wonder though if his turn in the last couple of years is genuine, like if he's really like, oh, I'm learning all this stuff, or it's just because I made all this money and now I can say whatever I want. I don't know. I don't know, but.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, I wonder if he's making money now. I don't know how that world works. Maybe he doesn't need to. I guess that's your point.
Yeah, he might be untethered now, and he can be based, and he can just say what's on his mind, and so I think he would definitely be open to having a discussion with you about that stuff. If considering some of the guests that he's had on, that'd be.
Well, I'm easy to find. I mean, I have a website which has my personal email address, and I do try to answer every single one.
I tracked you down in 2019, and here we are.
Yeah.
And Candace Owens has been very complimentary, which has been awesome, because that reached a whole audience of people who had no idea.
So I've heard. I mean, I noticed my numbers changing pretty dramatically, so I hope she keeps talking about it.
Yeah, no, she's reading your book, and then my friend Jess Reed Krause, she has the largest Substack, one of the largest Substacks out there. Her page is called House and Habit, and she, I think, because of Candace Owens talking about it.
And what's her name? I'm writing it down. I'll check it out. House and Habit. Her name is Krause, like Krause.
Yep, Jessica Reed Krause, Reed, and then Kraus. And House and Habit started as like a kind of mommy blogger, home lifestyle publication. And then she really blew up when she was covering the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. And I think she's one of the only people who got to do like a semi-interview, a phone call with Johnny Depp about it. And, her following.
So I get confused about Substack. Is that video too, or is it just like print media? I know it's not print, online reporting.
They're adding a video component, and they've added a podcast component to it. I haven't explored that yet. I have a page on there myself, but I love Substack. They've never censored. It's very direct. You have a direct line. It's like having a great email list, and then when you publish something, it goes out to everybody who subscribes to your stuff. So that world is.
Yeah, I think I created one. Somebody persuaded me to do it a couple of years ago, and I probably hit a button that said yes when they said send it out to my contacts. And then all of a sudden I started getting notifications that people were buying subscriptions to it, which would be fine if I was producing, stuff, because that's what they want. And I had to stop it and tell everybody, no, I'm not. I'm not like writing articles, and I don't want you paying $5 a month for nothing. A lot of them were old friends of mine who probably saw it and thought they wanted to support me. So I think I had it nipped in the bud. Either I stopped the subscription. I don't think I have anything on there. I can't even remember. But I don't know how all that stuff works. I'm just so proud of the fact that I figured out how to use Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah. So obviously it came out in a tweet, or I think you even mentioned this on the Rick Rubin podcast, but there is something coming out this fall with Mr. Errol
Yeah,
Morris. What can you
yeah.
tease from that, Tom?
I'm
What can
not.
you
I'm
tell?
not. They don't want me talking about it. In fact, I wasn't allowed to talk about it at all until Netflix announced it. But then Errol talked about it a few months ago, so I figured, well, once he talked about it, I can talk about it. But he didn't really say the approach or the angle, and they don't want me doing that. So all I'm really allowed to do is say that it's happening. And I think I did Rick's thing in March or April, but since then I found out that it's not coming out in the fall. Now it's been pushed to the winter.
Oh,
So it was originally supposed to come out last fall or this. I can't even keep up anymore. I'm kind of out of the loop on it. They're doing, they got all they needed from me, I guess. Shot me and came here and digitized everything, and they're on their own little journey now. And I'll find out more about it down the line, I guess. I hope it'll be good.
I mean, yeah, because Wormwood was phenomenal, and obviously you told the story about how you were going to originally do stuff with
Yeah,
him, and
yeah,
then they wanted to do Chaos stuff and Wormwood, and it's just too much to do in one documentary. It's got to have its own
Separate.
series,
Yeah.
yeah. That was I originally was working with Errol in 2014. I guess that I never watched these podcasts, but maybe I talked about it on Rubens, that I walked away from it because Errol and I had I guess I explained what it was, if you know it, that he
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to merge Eric Olson's story with mine. And I
Right.
said Eric deserves his own thing, and I deserve my own. And I didn't even have a book then. Right then, I was getting sued by my first publisher, and I didn't know if I'd ever have a book, so it was just going to be someone else's vision. So I didn't want to share it with another story, and
yeah.
walked away from it. But I was glad I did it in the end, because then Eric did get, like a 4-hour series, I think, where he finally got to tell what he believed happened to his dad. And
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's devastating, but it's a really important story, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, because I think it was President Ford did apologize to the family in some kind of weird
yeah. He
way.
had them come to the White House, but they had to sign like a contract that
NDAs.
they'd never sue them again. Nothing. I
Right, they
mean,
wouldn't pursue it.
it was, and Gerald Ford knew everything. He was on the
Oh,
Warren Commission.
he's the
He
one who
was an
moved the wounds on
intelligence.
Kennedy's back. Yeah, he moved the wound on Kennedy's back.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So that was a crime. That was a crime against that family.
so, who out there, Tom, that's still alive, do you would really love to talk to? Like, who's on your list that you haven't been able to talk to, and that you're hoping to talk to in case there's another book or your continuing research expands?
Oh, well, you mentioned Tex Watson.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I doubt that he'd ever tell the truth. Linda Kasabian was really at the top before, because I know that she knows. There's a couple people I can't say their names now because they're not officially connected to this.
Okay.
And
We don't need to.
yeah. So, I mean, let's say there's at least a half dozen people who could be kind of game changer interview subjects if I can get them to talk to me. And then there's another 10 who are people I already tried to get talk to me, and I chronicle that in the book, who I've gone back to and I'm still going back to. But as far as public figures that people would know, it's like, Dennis Wilson knew the secrets. Terry Melcher did. Dennis is dead. Terry's dead.
Yeah.
Linda's dead. Vince is dead. There's a couple people connected to Vince who I'm hoping to finally get to talk to me. Yeah, so I'm working on a follow-up. I haven't committed to it yet because I'm not doing it unless I get enough definitive stuff. I don't want it to have any loose ends like the last one did. But at this point, it's been 5 years already, so it's almost turning into what the last thing became, a 20-year project.
Yeah.
So I'm close. I'm close to making the decision whether to pull the trigger or not. And if I do it, then, I'm not, I mean, luckily I have the best collaborator in the world and he wants to do it again. So it shouldn't take, once I have him in the mix, then it'll happen fast. But he's not really involved in the reporting and research part, which is the funnest part. I mean, it's also it's among the most frustrating parts, but he's pretty busy with a couple of his own book contracts. He's reviewing books for Harper's Magazine, and he has a newborn baby. So luckily, he's not pestering me so much about doing the follow-up like he was a year or two ago.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you told a really cool story about going and meeting Marilyn Manson, and you've been contacted by Quentin Tarantino. Are there any other
Yeah.
kind of big names that have reached out to you that have kind of taken you by surprise to offer their support or encouragement? Or
Yeah, I guess there's some who are
you have fans in many different arenas.
Corners of
yeah.
society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff I hear about like second and third hand, like I'll find out that somebody talked about it and said how much they lost the book, but now I'm having amnesia. I mean, I know like Bret Easton Ellis really likes the book. I've gotten to have a couple meals with him, and
Cool.
that's also his milieu, dark kind of psychopathic behavior. So I've had a couple
Canyons.
fun, long talks with him.
Yeah, it seems like it's been quite a journey for you.
Yeah, and it's all different now that since the book came out, because for the first 20 years, nobody would talk to me, and nobody, especially outside of my family and close friends, knew what the hell I was doing. So it's weird to have people just reach out to me that, like Rick Rubin. Well, actually, I met Rick Rubin at a dinner, but that he's so familiar with the work is pretty cool. And, other authors and reporters and stuff.
Yeah, the Rubin episode was phenomenal. It was like one of the best podcasts in general that I've ever heard. It just because, like you said, he had such a wide range of knowledge, and the dude is genuinely curious about it. And,
Yeah, he's got that real kind of serene, kind of meditative approach to it, where he's talking
Yeah.
about horrible things, but it sounds like he's some kind of yoga instructor or something.
yeah, sitting there
nice.
barefoot with his beard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually sends me lots of emails and stuff, making sure I don't miss stuff that's kind of related
Oh,
to
that's
the
cool.
subject. Hey, I got one just a few days ago, so he was great. Yeah.
Yeah, Rick Rubin's like, so Rick, you can't read music. No. Do you know how to play any instruments? Barely.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I like that kind of iconoclastic approach to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he's very successful at what he does.
Oh man, yeah, he did a cool series with Paul McCartney where it was just him and McCartney in a studio together, and they went through dissecting some of McCartney's most iconic music. And
I heard, I should see that. I've heard that was fantastic.
Yeah, you'd really appreciate it. Yeah, now that you're buddies with him and you've done, you've hung out with him a couple times. And then have you ever heard through the grapevine from anyone who's like was part of the case or connected to it that's read Chaos and had stuff to say about it, like through the grapevine or channels or anything like that?
I've heard from like family members of people, and I actually just had a long talk last week with Irving Kanarik's daughter. Irving Kanarik was Manson's attorney, who really kind of slowed down the trial by being obstructionist. And she and I had an interesting conversation. I heard from the daughter of the milkman. The milkman was the one that Vince thought was the father of his own first child and stalked him and threatened him. So I hear from peripheral people like that.
Nothing from Roman Polanski? You don't know if he's read it or commented on it or?
Good question. No, I know Deborah Tate. She's a friend of mine, although I haven't talked to her for about a year. But she got the book, and she talks to him a lot. They're close.
Oh,
and
wow.
I never even asked her. I'm pretty sure she wouldn't have given it to him because she said, they talk about Sharon and they talk about, she said he's like a brother to me. He was her brother-in-law.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize they were still close.
Yeah. She said they talk on the phone. I think she's seen him a couple times. Obviously, she has to go to Europe. But I've never asked her whether or not she gave it to him or would give it to him. I guess if I talked to her, I could ask her. But I do know he doesn't like, thinking about that aspect of Sharon and his kid, the baby. So I'd have to guess he probably wouldn't want to read it, but who knows?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking more of the other stuff like connected to the case and the scene, and the drug dealers, the musicians, the Hollywood people, all at those parties, and kind of what the research suggests
Yeah, well,
with
I
those.
mean, this is a long story, but I'll keep it to a minute or two. He had agreed to talk to me back in the early 2000s. And, I talked to enough of his inner circle that word got to him what I was doing. And I also was pressuring his inner circle and almost begging them to get Roman to agree to meet with me. So Gene Katowski, who was his producing partner for many years, and Victor Lowndes, who was a close friend. He actually started Playboy with Hefner. It was two or three of those guys said that to Roman he might want to talk to me, and then Roman had a partner named Andy Bronsberg, who was produced like all of his films since the early '70s. And Bronsberg said he would give me five minutes at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. He lived in Europe too, or London or something. And he said, I'll give you 5 minutes for a cup of coffee, but I'm not talking to you for more than 10. I know Roman's not going to want to do this. So we met, and it turned into a 2-hour conversation. And at the end of it, he said, okay, you can talk to him. He said, I'll tell him to talk to you. And if I tell him to do it, he'll do it. But you can only do it once. Obviously, you have to go to Paris. And you can't do it, or you shouldn't do it, until you've lined up all your ducks in a row, because you can't go back for follow-ups. It's a one-time thing. He said if if Roman sits down and talks with you, he'll be depressed for a month after. So I just want it to happen once. So I said, great, it might be another year or so. And he said, fine. And that was probably about 2001 or two. And little did I know it would be a lot longer. And then finally, when I thought now's the time, this whole thing happened where he was detained in Sweden or Switzerland on a skiing vacation, I think, by the government there, which agreed to consider extraditing him here to face the charges in LA. And he was under house arrest in whichever one of those Nordic countries he was in for about a month. And then finally, the United States lost the effort ended. Whatever country it was, they were not going to extradite him. At that point, Polanski said, I'm not doing any more interviews. But then he got Me Too'd, and he can't even release the film over here. So it'd be like 100 times harder for him to talk about something like this. But, it's also something I could push. Deborah has always said that if she asks him to, he'll talk to me. So it is the kind of thing I should, time's running out.
He's got to be 90. He's in his late.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He might be pushing 90 at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I don't know. I mean, I do think he knows stuff, but would he tell me? I don't know. I could expense the trip to Paris if nothing else, so maybe I'll do it.
Yeah, you could go get some nice. You go on the Champs-Élysées and check out.
And I wouldn't want to waste his time, but some of his movies are my favorite movies ever. So just to talk to the man responsible for that would be pretty cool.
Well, yeah,
he's
90. Trying to separate the man from the art, and that's a whole other discussion. But I love The Pianist, and of course the one he did with Ewan McGregor there, Ghost Rider. That was a fascinating.
That was a really underrated movie. I thought
Yeah, and then of course Rosemary's Baby, which is just horrifying. I mean, that movie still, and that's weird too. The satanic element of that, and then what happened, and it's just there's so many things with this case, everybody, and we are coming up on almost an hour. I want to be respectful of Tom's time, that we really can't obviously cover it all in an hour. And I would just encourage everybody to purchase this book. I think it's 550 pages, but you can also do the audio if you want. That's available. You can listen to the audio version. And we hope you continue doing your research, and we would obviously push you to do another book, but hey, you got to live your life too. I mean,
I do tell people, a lot of people like the audio, and I like audiobooks myself. And I'm just happy if people get it. But if you get the print version, you get the endnotes. So the 60 pages of additional information. And a lot of people think endnotes are just sourcing, like where I found this, what file, what archive. But I cheat, and a lot of authors do this, is I also add like a whole new 2 or 3 paragraphs of stuff that, Dan and I, my collaborator, really didn't disagree too much. But he knew that if I really wanted something in the body of the narrative and the main thing, he'd say, it's going to slow it down. It's too much information. Save it for the end notes. And I'd be like, but Dan, they only said they're going to give us 10 pages and I need more. And he said, well, we can fight for it. And sure enough, they very generously gave me about 60 pages of end notes. So I have a lot of stuff that was cut from the main narrative that's in the back at the end notes. And maybe if you get the audio book, try to get the print book from your library and have the end notes. Don't go to them while you're listening or reading, because it does slow things down. But when you finish the book, if you're an obsessive like a lot of people are, there's a lot more information in the back of the book.
Yeah, that's great. That's great that they afforded you that, and I think that's really important. To your point earlier about having the sources in there, and not just like a obscure line or something, but an actual description, and it's almost a whole other book in of itself, and it shades in a lot of that background and context. So that's great stuff. Well, all right. Well, that is going to do it for us for Jackman Radio tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed the program. And Tom, where can people find your work and support you and buy the book and look at all what you're up to in your social media and whatnot?
Yeah, I've been a little bit dormant on the social media. I used to create a lot of videos and scan documents. I haven't been doing that as much, but everything I've done is collected on 2 sites, the Instagram page and the Facebook page. I kind of like, and also I have a YouTube page, but that's just the videos. No, I'll have slideshows on Instagram and Facebook of scanned documents, but I don't know how to put that on YouTube. So it's either now you're going to ask me what they're called. Shoot.
We have the Twitter link. We do have the Twitter link.
That's in the description.
Yeah, go to the Instagram. The Instagram is called Chaos Manson Book.
Okay.
Or Chaos Book Manson, whatever. If you just go to Instagram and you do the search for that's where I think it's the easiest page to navigate. And we'll see, like, I've got a 20-minute video of my investigation of Stephen Parent, who was killed the first night, and his weird relationship with the Catholic priest who identified the body. I have my reporting on what might have been an attempt the night before the Tate House to try to kill them at J. Sebring. So that's all on there, and that's where they can go. That's all free too, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Right, where they cut the wrong wire. They cut the TV.
Right. Oh, you saw that. Yeah.
We'll have to get in. We can get into that maybe in another podcast. But again, there's so much information to cover, and hopefully we asked you a couple questions you haven't been asked about. Or
yeah. No, it's fun. Yeah. No, you did.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. It's really it's been an honor to speak with you, and thank you everyone for listening.
We finally did it.
Me too. And we will see everybody next time.